Today is Good Friday, and we want to pause and just reflect on today, where the focus is, of course, on the cross. As I've been reflecting and thinking about what Good Friday means and what happened on that day, I've been asking myself this one question, which is, what is true power? Now, in Jesus' ministry, we see him moving around and operating in what seems like great power. People don't get to force his agenda. He always feels like he's on a mission. He's got a sense of timing, a sense of following the Father's voice. He doesn't bow to authorities. He doesn't follow after the traditions of man. He walks into the temple and he turns over the tables. Yet in the Passion narrative and the parts that lead up to it, we see a Jesus who is simply letting evil be done to him. And it begins in the Last Supper, where he turns and says to Judas, "What you're about to do, go and do it quickly." And Jesus seems to stop evading capture. He stops slipping through the crowds as we read in the Gospels. He simply lets evil have its way. He lays down. He carries his own cross up a hill and he stretches out his arms. Despite the wrestling in the garden, he comes to the conclusion, "Father, your will be done, not mine." Yet the whole narrative around the Passion is full with this narrative, this idea of Jesus being the King. I've been reading through John's Gospel and his account of the Passion narrative, and the idea of king comes out again and again. Of course, the Jewish leaders accused Jesus of being the king of the Jews, and when he's questioned by Pilate, Jesus replies that my kingdom is not of this world. And Pilate goes, "Well, so you are a king then?" Later, Pilate says, "Don't you realize I have the power to make you free or to send you to your death on a cross?" And Jesus answers, he says, "You would have no power over me if it had not been given to you from above." Pilate tries then from that point to try and free him, but he can't. The people really want Jesus to be dead. And he says to the crowd, he says, "Shall I crucify your king?" And they reply, "We have no king but Caesar," which just simply reveals their political motives. They want Jesus to be seen as a threat to Caesar so that they can get him killed by the Roman Empire. The Jewish leaders are trying to trap Pilate, in a sense. Yet Pilate, in his own kind of way, seems to get it. He seems to understand something about Jesus. Despite eventually giving in to the Jewish leaders to send Jesus away for crucifixion, he still has the sign above Jesus' cross read, "Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews." And of course, the Jewish leaders kick up a fuss about this, and they're not happy about this, because that's not who they see he is. Think he's an imposter. And then, of course, there's the play acting that takes part as part of Jesus' crucifixion, where the soldiers put a robe on him and a crown of thorns. It's mocking him, it's making fun of him, and yet behind it, and behind the inscription on the cross, there is a great truth. And then, of course, we know on that Good Friday that Jesus was crucified. And it's in this part of the story we see these different powers at work. But who has the true power? Jesus reminds Pilate, of course, that the only power and authority he has is because what God has given to him. And Jesus willingly stretches out his arms and dies on the cross. He gives up his spirit. And of course, it seems like defeat from a worldly perspective, but it actually couldn't be further from the truth. It is the very act of letting evil have its way with him that Jesus wins a great victory on that Good Friday. A sinless man taking on the sins of the world, all the evil in the world, all the hate and all the pain, letting all of it being poured out onto Jesus, letting the world do its worst to him. God willingly laying down and letting us do our worst to him, so that he might free us from the captivity of sin. It was on this day, on Good Friday, as Jesus breathed his last on the cross, that the great victory was won. Of course, we wouldn't see the results for another 2 days until Jesus was resurrected. But in the meantime, we have Jesus' words when he says, "It is finished." And of course, Colossians 2:15 says this, "And having disarmed the powers and authorities, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross." What is true power? The Passion narrative plays with the idea of power and kingship and who has authority. But what do we see here? What is true power? Well, true power is love. What do we see on the cross? Love. Power is not this overbearing, controlling over our others, using strength to restrain them. It's not violence or war or destroying the lives of others or holding them in captivity. Power is not about being in authority positions. It's about living out love. Love. It's this incredible thing. It's both completely free and yet costs us absolutely everything. Today, as we reflect on the cross, the brutal death of the true King, we see that there is a greater power in the world. 1 John 3:16 says this, "This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters." So this Good Friday, as we reflect on the cross, let's think about what is the true power at work in Jesus, in the cross, the great victory that doesn't look like a victory. And before we start to celebrate what happens through the resurrection on Sunday, let's pause and reflect on that picture of Jesus on the cross. The God of the universe willingly laying down his life for you and I. Is there anything more beautiful? Bless you guys. We pray that you have an incredible Easter season and you know that God is close to you as ever. Bye for now.